She marched up to me at the pool like she owned the whole zip code, phone already dialing 911. "You're trespassing," she snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. But what she didn't know, I had legal rights, signed documents, and a landlord who helped build this place. That one phone call started a chain reaction, police reports, lawsuits, and a secret from 10 years ago that would cost her everything. If you've ever seen a Karen crash and burn in real time, buckle up. This one takes the trophy. Even the police said this is the most satisfying HOA takedown I've ever seen. Where are you watching this video from? Let me know in the comments below. I never thought moving to a quiet suburban neighborhood would turn me into some kind of community detective, but that's exactly what happened last summer. My name is Canyon Thorne, a 34-year-old freelance landscape architect who had just moved into a charming little house in Lakeview Estates. After spending the first few weeks unpacking, I was eager to explore the neighborhood amenities. The summer heat was brutal that year, and I'd noticed a beautiful community pool just a short walk from my place. According to my rental agreement with Rowan Hale, my landlord, I had full access to the swimming pool despite not being part of the Sunny Creek Homeowners Association that maintained it. It was part of a special arrangement from years ago, something about Rowan being an early investor in the development. On a particularly hot Saturday afternoon, I grabbed my towel and headed to the pool. The place was moderately busy with families and sunbathers. I found an empty lounge chair, spread my towel, and was just about to dive in when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see a woman in her early 50s with highlighted hair styled in an immaculate bob, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, and a pastel tennis outfit that looked like it had never seen a tennis court. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest, and her mouth was set in a thin, disapproving line. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that makes you instantly know you're dealing with someone who enjoys enforcing rules. "I'm Sienna Wren, president of the Sunny Creek HOA. May I ask where you live?" I smiled politely and extended my hand. "Hi, I'm Canyon Thorne. I just moved into the blue house on Pinecrest Lane over in Lakeview Estates." Her smile vanished instantly. "Lakeview Estates? Then you're not a Sunny Creek resident. This pool is exclusively for Sunny Creek homeowners and their guests. You'll need to leave immediately." I was taken aback, but maintained my composure. "Actually, there's a special arrangement for my property. My landlord explained that the house comes with pool privileges. It's in my rental agreement." Sienna's eyes narrowed. "I've been president of this HOA for 7 years, and I can assure you there are no such special arrangements. Now, I'll ask you once more to leave before I'm forced to call security." I tried to explain again, but Sienna wasn't interested. She pulled out her phone and made a show of dialing. "Hello? Yes, we have a trespasser at the Sunny Creek Community Pool who refuses to leave. I've already asked him politely, thank you." Rather than cause a scene, I gathered my things and left, feeling both embarrassed and irritated as several sunbathers watched the exchange. As I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Rowan had been very clear about the once home. I checked my rental agreement and there it was in black and white. "Tenant shall enjoy full access to the Sunny Creek Community Pool as per the standing agreement between property owner and Sunny Creek HOA dated June 15, 2013. That was just the beginning. I had no idea that Sienna blocking me from using the pool would start a battle she would never want to fight. And I certainly didn't expect to uncover a secret she had kept hidden from the entire neighborhood for 10 years. The next day, I called Rowan to clarify the pool situation. He wasn't just surprised, he was angry. "Of course you have pool rights," he said firmly. "That agreement has been in place since Sunny Creek was first developed. I was one of the original investors in the project, and when I decided to keep my house in what became Lakeview Estates, part of our arrangement was permanent pool access for my property. It's all legally documented. Sienna knows this perfectly well, she just chooses to forget whenever it suits her agenda." Rowan emailed me copies of the original agreement. The documents showed the exact terms, complete with signatures from the original developers and subsequent HOA presidents, including Sienna herself from 3 years ago when the agreement had been reviewed and reaffirmed. This wasn't some casual handshake deal. It was a legally binding covenant that ran with the property. "Sienna has been trying to erase this agreement since she became president," Rowan explained. "She hates the idea of outsiders using her facilities. She's particularly fixated on your house for some reason. I've had other tenants who've experienced similar issues, but none as blatant as what you're describing." I consulted with an old friend from college, Lyra Quinn, who now worked as a real estate attorney in town. After reviewing the documents, Lyra confirmed the agreement was ironclad and Sienna had no legal grounds to prevent me from using the pool. This is what we call a covenant running with the land, Lyra explained. It was properly executed, recorded with the county, and has been continuously acknowledged by successive HOA boards. Sienna can't unilaterally decide to ignore it. My advice? Write a formal letter referencing the agreement, attach copies of the documentation, and keep it with you whenever you use the pool. If there's any more trouble, you'll have legal grounds to push back. That evening, I met Janet Patel, my next-door neighbor, while checking my mail. When I mentioned my pool encounter with Sienna, Janet rolled her eyes knowingly. "Consider yourself officially initiated into the neighborhood," she said with a sympathetic smile. "Sienna has been on a power trip ever since she became HOA president. She tried to fine me for planting non-approved rose varieties in my own backyard, and I don't even live in Sunny Creek. She thinks her HOA authority extends beyond her actual jurisdiction. Several of us have had run-ins with her. You're not alone, but you might be the first person with actual legal documentation to stand up to her." Janet mentioned that Sienna had previously been involved with another HOA across town but had left under mysterious circumstances. "There were rumors about financial improprieties," Janet whispered, "but nothing was ever proven." As I walked back to my house, I felt more determined than ever to assert my rights. This wasn't just about swimming pool access anymore. It was about standing up to a bully who had been allowed to run unchecked for too long. I had the legal ammunition I needed, and I was prepared to use it. What I didn't know was that Sienna had already planned her next move, one that would escalate our conflict far beyond what I could have imagined. I had all the paperwork to prove my legal right, but what I didn't know was that Sienna had planned a welcome for me in a way no one could have anticipated, and her calling the police was just the opening act of a battle that would ultimately expose the whole truth about this HOA. Armed with my documentation, I returned to the pool 3 days later. It was a quieter afternoon, with only a handful of people enjoying the water. I had barely laid out my towel when Sienna materialized beside me, accompanied by a nervous-looking man in his late 30s. "I thought I made myself clear," she said loudly. "This pool is for Sunny Creek residents only." I remained calm and pulled out my documentation. "Miss Wren, I have a legal agreement granting access rights to my property. I'd be happy to show you." She cut me off with a dismissive wave. "I don't need to see your so-called documentation. I know exactly what properties are in our HOA, and yours isn't one of them." Without even glancing at my papers, she pulled out her phone. "Yes, hello? This is Sienna Wren, president of the Sunny Creek Homeowners Association. We have an intruder at our community pool who refuses to leave. Yes, this is the second time. He is trespassing on private property and disturbing our residents." After hanging up, she turned to me with a smug smile. "The police are on their way. I suggest you leave now to avoid embarrassment." I stood my ground. "I'm not leaving. I have every legal right to be here, and I'm happy to explain that to the police." The man with Sienna looked uncomfortable. He whispered something to her, who responded with a sharp, "Not now, Kevin," before stalking off to wait for the police. About 15 minutes later, a police cruiser arrived. A tall officer approached, looking more weary than concerned. Sienna hurried over to him. "Officer Asher, thank you for coming so quickly," she said pleasantly. "This man is trespassing on our private property and refusing to leave." Officer Asher turned to me. "Sir, can I see some identification, please?" I provided my driver's license and calmly explained the situation, showing him the legal agreement. "I have every right to use this pool according to this binding legal agreement. Ms. Wren is aware of this document, but has chosen to ignore it." Officer Asher reviewed the paperwork while Sienna fumed beside him, trying to interject with comments about unauthorized modifications and outdated agreements. After several minutes, the officer handed my documents back. "Mazrin," he said, "based on these documents, Mr. Thorne does appear to have legal access rights to this facility. This seems to be a civil matter regarding property covenants, not a criminal trespassing issue." Sienna's face flushed red. "That's impossible. I'm the HOA president. I would know if there were any such arrangements." "May I speak with you privately?" Sienna asked the officer, pulling him a few yards away. Though they spoke in hushed tones, I caught fragments of their conversation. "Cannot have random people, safety concerns, reputation of our community." Then I heard something that caught my attention. As Sienna became more agitated, her voice rose. "I will not allow another failure like 10 years ago to happen on my watch." What failure was she referring to? And what did it have to do with me or my house? After their conversation, Officer Asher returned. Mr. Thorne, you're free to stay and use the pool. Your documentation appears to be in order. He then turned to Sienna. Ms. Wren, I need to remind you that misuse of emergency services for non-emergency situations can result in penalties. If there's a dispute over property covenants, I suggest you consult with the HOA's attorney rather than calling the police. Sienna was livid. This isn't over, she said, looking directly at me. The board will be discussing this matter and will be taking appropriate measures. As she stormed off, Officer Asher gave me an apologetic look. Sorry about this. Between you and me, this isn't the first call we've had from Miss Wren about supposed trespassers who turned out to have every right to be where they were. After the officer left, I stayed to enjoy the pool, partly out of principle. As I was swimming laps, I noticed Kevin hovering near my belongings. When I approached, he spoke quickly and quietly. I'm Kevin Vale, new board member. I'm sorry about today. Not everyone on the board agrees with how Sienna handles things. There are issues with how she interprets the boundaries and rules. He glanced around nervously. Just watch yourself. She doesn't like being challenged. Before I could respond, he walked away quickly. I thought the incident would end after the police confirmed my right, but I was too naive. 2 days later, I received a letter from the HOA with a $500 fine for rule violations. That's when I decided I wouldn't back down anymore. And what I discovered when I dug deeper into the HOA documents completely stunned me. The official-looking letter from the Sunny Creek HOA cited me for unauthorized facility use and disruptive behavior, with a demand for $500 payment within 30 days. The letter bore Sienna's flourishing signature and an embossed HOA seal designed to intimidate. I called Lyra, who laughed when I told her about the fine. They can't fine you. You're not a member of their HOA, she explained. They have no enforcement mechanism against your property. This is just harassment that borders on extortion. Keep the letter as evidence. Lyra suggested I research Sienna and the HOA's operations. People who abuse authority in one area rarely limit it to just that. That evening, I searched online for information about Sienna's history with homeowners associations. After digging through local news archives, I found a small article from 7 years ago mentioning that Sienna had stepped down from her position as treasurer of the Oakmont Village HOA amid allegations of financial mismanagement. The article was vague, noting only that irregularities were discovered in the association's books and that the matter was resolved privately without formal charges. I turned my attention to the Sunny Creek HOA's publicly available documents. Through the county records office's online portal, I found that the bylaws clearly stated fines could only be assessed against member properties in good standing, which my house definitely was not. More importantly, I discovered several amendments that had gradually expanded the board president's powers while reducing oversight requirements. While reviewing boundary maps, I noticed something odd. The current HOA map showed the boundary between Sunny Creek and Lakeview Estates, cutting through properties in a way that didn't match the original development plans from Rowan. Someone had subtly shifted the line to include portions of non-HOA properties within Sunny Creek's claimed territory, including a corner of my property. The next day, I met with Janet and neighbors who had experienced problems with Sienna. We gathered in Janet's backyard as they shared their stories. She had my car towed from in front of my own house because she claimed it was an eyesore, said Bill, an elderly man who lived 2 doors down. I don't even live in her HOA. It cost me $300 to get it back. She's been gradually moving the boundary markers, added Maria. My backyard used to be clearly outside HOA territory. Now Sienna claims half my yard is subject to their landscaping restrictions. I showed them the boundary discrepancies in the maps. See how the line has shifted? It encompasses parts of properties that should be entirely outside their jurisdiction. Through county records, I discovered that the original developers had set aside the pool area as a common facility with specific access rights granted to certain properties outside Sunny Creek, including my house. I also found evidence of an attempted boundary adjustment filing from 10 years ago that had been withdrawn after objections from several property owners, including Rowan. That evening, Kevin Vale asked to meet me at a coffee shop across town. When I arrived, he was sitting in a corner booth, nervously checking his phone. I've been on the board for only 6 months, he began quietly. Sienna helped me get elected. She mentored me when I first moved here. I owe her in many ways, but what she's doing isn't right. Kevin explained that Sienna ran the HOA like a personal fiefdom, making decisions unilaterally. She's obsessed with expanding Sunny Creek's territory. The boundary issue you discovered is just the tip of the iceberg. She's been systematically reinterpreting old agreements and updating maps for years. Why would she do that? I asked. Control, primarily, but also money. Properties within the HOA pay substantial dues, and Sienna has discretion over how those funds are allocated. There's also a development company interested in buying parcels to build luxury condos. The more territory Sunny Creek controls, the more leverage Sienna has. I could see Kevin's internal struggle. I can't be publicly associated with opposing her, he said, but I can provide you with information, board minutes, financial reports. Maybe you'll find something that helps. By the time I left, I had a clearer picture. This wasn't just about a swimming pool. It was about a systematic pattern of boundary manipulation, financial mismanagement, and abuse of power. And somehow, my house stood as a symbol of Sienna's biggest failure from the past, a failure she seemed determined to erase. I had enough information to prove Sienna was abusing her power, and she had no idea I was bringing this evidence to the upcoming HOA meeting. The monthly Sunny Creek HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening at the community center. Kevin had texted me the details, confirming that non-HOA residents could attend as observers, according to the bylaws. Armed with documents, maps, and historical records, I arrived early to find about 30 homeowners already gathered. Sienna was at the front, arranging papers at a long table with other board members. When she spotted me, her smile faltered before she hurried over. "Mr. Thorne," she said quietly, "this meeting is for Sunny Creek residents only. I must ask you to leave." Before I could respond, Kevin appeared. "Actually, Sienna, the bylaws allow for residents of neighboring communities to attend as observers. Section 3, paragraph 7. His voice was steady, but his hand trembled slightly. Sienna's eyes narrowed, but with others watching, she couldn't make a scene. "Fine, but observers are to sit in the back and remain silent." As I found a seat, Janet and other Lakeview residents entered and sat nearby. The meeting began with standard HOA business for 30 minutes. Then, Sienna moved to new business. "We've had an ongoing issue with unauthorized use of our facilities," she announced. "The board is proposing enhanced security measures, including keycard access to the pool and increased security patrols. This would require a special assessment of $200 per household." Murmurs ran through the room. An elderly man raised his hand. "What specific incidents are prompting this? I'm at the pool almost daily and haven't noticed any problems." Sienna explained about multiple reports of outsiders using the pool, creating liability issues. She mentioned a recent incident requiring police intervention without naming me directly. When she finished, I raised my hand. Sienna ignored me until several homeowners began glancing back, noticing her oversight. "Yes, the gentleman in the back," she finally acknowledged frostily. I stood up. "My name is Canyon Thorne, and I believe I'm the incident Ms. Wren is referring to. I'd like to clarify a few points. Observers are not permitted to speak during official business," Sienna cut in. A woman in the second row turned around. "I'd like to hear what he has to say, especially if we're being asked to pay for new security because of it." Several homeowners nodded in agreement, and Sienna reluctantly conceded. "Thank you," I began. "I recently moved into a house in Lakeview Estates that has a long-standing legal agreement granting access to this pool. When I attempted to use it, Ms. Wren refused to look at my documentation and called the police. Officer Asher confirmed my legal right to be there, as did your HOA's own governing documents." I held up the papers. "But that's not the only concerning discovery I've made. I found evidence that your HOA maps have been systematically altered to claim jurisdiction over properties that are legally outside your boundaries." The room erupted in whispers as I placed several maps on the table. "Here is the original development plan approved by the county, and here is your current HOA map. You can see how the boundary has shifted to encompass parts of Lakeview Estates properties." Sienna's face paled. "These are baseless accusations from someone trying to justify trespassing." "They're not baseless," came a voice from the doorway. Rowan Hale stepped into the room. "I was one of the original investors in this development. The pool access agreement for my house was part of my investment compensation, and I can confirm that the boundaries shown on that original map are correct." Kevin cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the county records, and Mr. Thorne's documentation appears valid. The pool access agreement was reauthorized by this board just 3 years ago. We all signed it, including you, Sienna." "And what about these boundary changes?" asked a homeowner, examining the maps. "Have we been claiming authority over properties that aren't actually in our HOA?" Sienna was visibly flustered. "These are complex legal matters that shouldn't be discussed without our attorney present." "If they're so complex," I interjected, Then perhaps we should also discuss why the original pool area was established with a permanent easement requiring access for specific Lakeview properties, or why those easements were attempted to be removed from county records 10 years ago without proper authorization. The meeting had completely derailed from Sienna's agenda. Homeowners were examining the maps, asking questions about boundaries and how HOA dues had been spent on enforcement against properties that weren't even under their jurisdiction. By the end of the evening, the proposed security measure had been tabled indefinitely, and several homeowners had called for a review of the HOA's boundaries and documents. Many thanked me for bringing these issues to light. Kevin pulled me aside as I gathered my documents. "You've started something big here," he said, quietly. "Sienna won't take this lying down. Be careful." The HOA meeting had turned into a perfect storm for Sienna. But that wasn't the worst of it, because just one day later, an anonymous email containing information about HOA funds being misappropriated was sent to all members, and I knew exactly who had sent it. Kevin Vale sat in his home office until 3 in the morning, his finger hovering over the send button. On his screen was an email addressed to every Sunny Creek homeowner with financial documents attached. The subject line read, "What you should know about your HOA funds." He'd battled with himself, remembering how Sienna had taken him under her wing, introducing him to important people, nominating him for the board. But as his access to HOA records increased, so did his discomfort with what he found. Finally, he clicked send, then immediately shut down his computer. The email would reach inboxes by morning. I knew nothing about Kevin's actions until Janet called me the next morning. "Have you seen it? The email about the HOA finances? Someone on the inside has blown the whistle on Sienna." Janet forwarded it to me. The anonymous email contained financial records showing a pattern of questionable decisions by Sienna over 5 years. HOA funds had been directed toward improvements in her section of the neighborhood, while necessary repairs elsewhere were delayed. Large sums had been paid to a consulting company for landscaping advice, a company owned by Sienna's brother-in-law. Most damning were records showing Sienna had authorized HOA funds to pay for legal consultations regarding boundary disputes. Consultations presented as general legal advice, but actually exploring ways to retroactively claim portions of Lakeview Estates properties. The whistleblower included a note, "I have been complicit through my silence, and for that I apologize. I can no longer watch as our community funds are misused and our trust is betrayed." Though I hadn't orchestrated this revelation, I had helped Kevin understand the financial documents, explaining which patterns to look for. My previous work with a land dispute law firm had given me insights that proved valuable to Kevin. By mid-afternoon, the Sunny Creek community was in an uproar. Homeowners were calling for an emergency meeting, demanding explanations for years of questionable financial decisions. The emergency meeting was packed when I arrived with Janet. Sienna sat at the front looking pale and defensive, flanked by 2 board members. Kevin was absent. When Sienna attempted to call the meeting to order, she was immediately interrupted by demands for explanations. For the first time, she appeared genuinely frightened, her confidence shattered by her neighbor's unified anger. "These documents were stolen and taken out of context," she began weakly. "This is a smear campaign orchestrated by outside interests." She looked directly at me, attempting to deflect blame. "Mr. Thorne has been trying to undermine our HOA since he arrived, and now he's convinced someone to illegally share private information." The room wasn't buying it. Homeowners stood up with specific questions about expenditures, pointing to discrepancies between what had been approved and what had been spent. "Why was $60,000 allocated for landscape renovation on your street when we've been told for years there wasn't enough to fix the playground?" demanded one mother. "How do you explain $15,000 paid to Summit Consulting Group when that company is registered to your brother-in-law who has no background in landscape architecture?" asked another homeowner. As questions mounted and Sienna's answers grew increasingly defensive, the mood shifted from anger to resolve. A motion was made to suspend Sienna pending a full independent audit. The vote was overwhelming against her. Backed into a corner, Sienna's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. You can't remove me. I've given everything to this community. This is all a conspiracy to discredit me, just like last time. I won't let anyone take this position from me. It's the last thing I have." The room fell silent, and an older homeowner asked, "What do you mean, like last time, Sienna?" Realizing her mistake, Sienna grabbed her things and stormed out, declaring she would consult her attorney about defamation and breach of confidentiality. After the meeting, I received a text from Kevin. "Need to talk. Creek Trail behind the pool in 20 minutes. When I met him, Kevin looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. She knows it was me, he said. Not for certain, but she suspects. You did the right thing, I assured him. The community needed to know the truth. Kevin nodded. There's something else you should know. Something about your house, specifically, and why Sienna has been so fixated on it. It's about what happened 10 years ago, her biggest failure and the secret she's been trying to bury ever since. When Sienna threatened legal action, I had already prepared the final bomb, a secret she had tried to bury for 10 years. This secret wouldn't just end her reign at the HOA, but could also land her in serious legal trouble. After my conversation with Kevin, I arranged a meeting with Rowan and Lyra at a restaurant downtown. Over dinner, we pieced together why Sienna was obsessed with my house. When Sienna first moved to the area, she tried to buy my house, Rowan explained. I had put it on the market briefly. She made an offer below asking price. When I declined, she seemed personally offended. Rowan decided not to sell and instead began renting the property. About 2 years after Sienna's failed attempt to purchase his house, strange things started happening with the property records. I received a notice from the county about a boundary adjustment filing that I supposedly had initiated, Rowan continued. According to this filing, I had agreed to sell a 15-foot strip of my backyard to Sienna's property. The documents had what appeared to be my signature, but I had never signed anything of the sort. Lyra picked up the story. It was a sophisticated attempt at property fraud. Someone had created falsified documents showing that Rowan had agreed to sell a portion of his land to Sienna. The strip in question would have given her property direct access to the small pond at the back of the Lakeview Estates area, substantially increasing her property's value. But how did she expect to get away with it? I asked. The county employee who initially processed the filing was Jeremy Watts, now retired. He and Sienna had a connection. His daughter was married to Sienna's cousin. The paperwork was fast-tracked in a way that bypassed normal verification steps. Rowan discovered the fraud when he received tax documents reflecting the changed property size. He immediately contested the filing and the boundary adjustment was reversed. The county conducted an investigation, but with Watts retired and without clear evidence of deliberate wrongdoing, the matter was handled administratively rather than criminally. To avoid public scandal, the resolution included a binding agreement, Rowan explained. Sienna would acknowledge the original property boundaries and, as a concession for not pursuing criminal charges, she would guarantee permanent pool access rights to my property. That's the agreement you've been using? It was born out of resolving a property fraud attempt. The story made Sienna's vendetta against me crystal clear. My house stood as a reminder of her failed scheme, a scheme that could have resulted in criminal charges. Her attempts to deny my pool access weren't just about keeping outsiders away. They were about trying to invalidate an agreement that served as evidence of her past misconduct. Sienna has been systematically altering HOA records to eliminate references to this incident, Kevin added. Documents that should have been there were missing, and others had clearly been edited. Kevin had brought copies of the original minutes he had recovered from the HOA's cloud storage backup, minutes that explicitly referenced the resolution of boundary dispute with Lakeview Estates property owner, and the perpetual facilities access agreement that resulted. She's been trying to erase history, he said. If she could successfully deny your access rights now, it would help establish a precedent that the agreement was invalid, potentially allowing her to claim it was never legitimate. Lyra's legal mind was calculating the implications. This goes beyond HOA misconduct. Attempting to fraudulently obtain property through falsified documents is a serious offense. If there's evidence she's been continuing to manipulate records to cover up the original fraud, that could extend the statutory time frame. I sat back, processing everything. My house wasn't just a house. It was physical evidence of Sienna's biggest failure, a constant reminder of her thwarted scheme. Every time she looked at it, she saw the potential property value she'd lost and the evidence of her fraudulent actions. We agreed to hold the information in reserve, a final card to play if Sienna forced our hand. What none of us anticipated was how quickly she would do exactly that. As predicted, Sienna didn't give up easily. 1 week later, I received a court notice that the HOA was suing me for trespassing and property damage. This was the perfect opportunity to present all the evidence in an environment Sienna couldn't escape, a courtroom. The official court summons arrived by certified mail 9 days after the emergency HOA meeting. Sunny Creek Homeowners Association vs. Canyon Thorn, alleging trespassing, property damage, and seeking both a permanent injunction against my use of HOA facilities and monetary damages. Despite the board's vote to suspend her, Sienna had filed the lawsuit as acting president, claiming procedural irregularities invalidated the suspension. I immediately called Lyra, who agreed to represent me. "This is actually perfect," she said. "She's opened the door for us to bring in all the evidence, not just about your pool rights, but about the property fraud attempt and her subsequent cover-up efforts." We filed a comprehensive response that not only defended against the allegations, but included a counter-suit alleging harassment, intentional misrepresentation, and making reference to the historical property fraud attempt as evidence of a pattern of misconduct. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. During that time, the Sunny Creek HOA was in turmoil. The independent audit had begun, revealing even more financial irregularities. Several board members had resigned, not wanting to be associated with the growing scandal. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with Lyra to find nearly 24 Sunny Creek residents there to observe. Some nodded to me in support, others simply looked curious about what would unfold. Sienna arrived with the HOA's attorney, Martin Reynolds, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. She was dressed formally, her expression confident as she whispered instructions without acknowledging the neighbors who had come to watch. Judge Eleanor Bradshaw, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a reputation for cutting through legal maneuvering, called the court to order. Reynolds presented the HOA's case, portraying me as a belligerent outsider who had repeatedly trespassed on private property despite warnings, causing disruption and damaging the community's sense of security. He requested a permanent injunction barring me from all Sunny Creek properties and facilities, plus damages. When it was our turn, Lyra methodically dismantled the HOA's claims. She presented the original property agreements, the pool access covenant, and Officer Asher's police report confirming my legal entitlement. She then introduced evidence of Sienna's pattern of harassment and the testimonials from other Lakeview residents who had experienced similar treatment. "Your Honor," Lyra said, "the plaintiff's fixation on my client's property goes far beyond typical HOA boundary concerns. We have evidence that Ms. Wren previously attempted to fraudulently acquire a portion of this same property through falsified documents submitted to the county recorder's office." Sienna's face drained of color as Lyra presented the county records from 10 years ago, including the investigation findings and the resulting agreement that had established the pool access rights as part of the resolution. Judge Bradshaw removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Sienna. "Ms. Wren, the court is troubled by what appears to be a personal vendetta pursued through the mechanism of an HOA. Before I rule, I'd like to hear directly from you. What is your response to the allegation that you attempted to fraudulently acquire property through falsified documents?" Sienna, clearly unprepared for this direct questioning, looked to her attorney for help. The judge cut him off. "I'm asking Ms. Wren directly, counsel." Put on the spot, Sienna attempted to deflect. "Your Honor, those allegations are from many years ago and were resolved administratively. They have no bearing on the current matter." "On the contrary," Judge Bradshaw replied firmly, "they appear to establish a pattern of behavior directly relevant to this case. The pool access rights that Mr. Thorne is exercising were explicitly granted as part of the resolution of that earlier dispute, a dispute you now seem to be attempting to relitigate through this HOA action." The judge dismissed the HOA's lawsuit entirely, finding that I had clear legal rights to use the pool and had caused no damage. She granted part of our countersuit, ordering Sienna personally, not the HOA, to pay my legal costs plus a small damage award for harassment. Most significantly, Judge Bradshaw announced that she was referring the property fraud documentation to the district attorney's office for review, noting that while the original incident might fall outside the statute of limitations, the ongoing efforts to conceal and misrepresent it could constitute continuing fraud within prosecutable timeframes. As we left the courtroom, several Sunny Creek residents approached me, expressing both apologies and gratitude for bringing Sienna's misconduct to light. The most surprising moment came when a distinguished older man introduced himself as the HOA's vice president. "On behalf of the board, I want to apologize for this fiasco," he said, shaking my hand. "The vote to suspend Sienna has been formalized and she no longer speaks for Sunny Creek in any capacity." Looking past him, I saw Sienna standing alone by the courthouse stairs, her former supporters having melted away. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw in her expression not anger, but fear, the realization that her decade of manipulation had finally come crashing down. The lawsuit ended with a victory for me, but the story had a different ending waiting. And 1 month later, when I received an unexpected letter from the new HOA, I understood that sometimes justice comes in sweeter ways than you might expect. 1 month after the courthouse hearing, I found an official-looking envelope in my mailbox bearing the Sunny Creek HOA logo. Inside was a formal letter of apology signed by the entire new HOA board, with Kevin Vale's signature at the top as interim president. "Dear Mr. Thorne," it began, "on behalf of the Sunny Creek Homeowners Association, we wish to extend our sincere apologies for the treatment you received under the previous administration. We are committed to rebuilding the relationship between our communities and ensuring that all property rights and agreements are respected fully." The letter formally acknowledged my pool access rights and included an invitation to join a newly formed Neighborhood Relations Committee aimed at improving communication between the adjacent communities. There was a handwritten note from Kevin. "We couldn't have made these changes without you. Thank you for standing your ground." Later that week, Kevin and I met for coffee. The transformation in him was remarkable. Gone was the nervous, conflicted man I'd first encountered. In his place sat someone confident and purposeful. "The audit is complete," he explained. "It's even worse than we thought. Sienna had been using HOA funds for personal expenses for years, disguising them as community improvements. We've had to raise dues temporarily to rebuild our reserves, but everyone agreed it was necessary once they saw the report." Kevin explained that the new board had instituted reforms to prevent future abuses, including transparent financial reporting, term limits for board positions, and a requirement that all major decisions be approved by a majority vote of homeowners. They had also commissioned a professional survey to accurately establish the HOA boundaries once and for all. As for Sienna, she had chosen to sell her house and leave the area entirely. The property had been purchased by a young family, a pediatrician and a teacher who had already begun making friends throughout the neighborhood. "There's one more thing," Kevin said, sliding an envelope across the table. "Many of us wanted to thank you properly." Inside was a permanent pool access card with my name printed on it, along with a certificate recognizing my valuable contribution to community integrity and transparency. "We're also placing a small plaque by the pool," Kevin added. "Nothing dramatic, just a reminder that the facility is for the enjoyment of both Sunny Creek and designated Lakeview residents, in the spirit of being good neighbors." The following weekend, I hosted a small barbecue in my backyard, inviting Janet, Rowan, Kevin, and several neighbors who had been involved in the saga. As we enjoyed food and drinks, conversation turned to the changes Sienna's departure had brought. "She'd turned so many people into enemies over the years," Janet reflected, "but no one ever stood up to her the way you did, Canyon. Most people just decided it was easier to avoid conflict." Rowan nodded. "I've owned that house for 25 years, and I've never seen the neighborhood this friendly. Even before Sienna arrived, there was always this invisible line between Sunny Creek and Lakeview. Now, people are actually crossing that line, socializing, helping each other." By sunset, my backyard was filled with neighbors from both communities, sharing stories and making plans for future joint events. Officer Asher even stopped by, having been invited by one of the Sunny Creek residents. As we chatted, he shook his head in amazement. "In 15 years on the force, that's the most satisfying HOA takedown I've ever seen," he admitted. "Usually these disputes just drag on forever. You've actually managed to make both neighborhoods better in the process." The following week, I received a job offer from a local landscape architecture firm, ironically one that had been contracted several times by the Sunny Creek HOA under Sienna's leadership. The owner had heard about my background and my role in the recent events and was impressed by both my professional credentials and my dedication to community values. The most gratifying moment came during the official reopening of the pool area, complete with the new plaque acknowledging the shared access rights. After a brief ceremony and ribbon cutting by the new board, I was among the first to dive in, along with several children from both neighborhoods. As I floated on my back, enjoying the sunshine, I reflected on how differently things had turned out from what I'd expected when I first moved to Lakeview Estates. What had begun as a simple desire to cool off on a hot day had evolved into a community transformation that none of us could have predicted. Sometimes, I thought to myself, a Karen not realizing you're not easy prey is the best thing that can happen to an entire community, and I'm proud I didn't back down when things got difficult, because in the end, justice and the pool belongs to those who fight for it. Whether you live in Lakeview Estates or Sunny Creek, they told me I didn't belong. They called the police. They tried to fine me, shame me, and silence me, all because I sat in a chair they thought I didn't deserve. But I didn't back down. And what started as one man refusing to be erased became something much bigger. It became a reckoning, not just for Karen, but for an entire system built on fear, silence, and unchecked power. If you've ever been made to feel small in a place you do belong, this story is for you. If you've ever been told, this isn't your place, just remember, boundaries aren't lines on maps. They're moments where someone finally says, no more. So tell me in the comments, where have you drawn your line? And if you're still fighting, know this, you're not alone. And one voice is enough to start something they can't control.